Pizza Guy in Fargo, and he wants... Pizza Guy, are you with us?
Yeah, hey, I just wanted to call and ask about your opinion on ISIS a little bit.
I assume you don't mean the Egyptian goddess.
No, I mean the Islamic State of Israel and Syria, or Iraq and Israel and Syria, Iraq and Syria.
Well, I think that, that it's following the pattern that I've seen most of my life, which is that the United States funds an organization and trains them to some extent, and then, they go off the rails and they do what they want.
Sure.
This is the same organization, essentially, that was that the United States was fighting in Iraq, helped in Libya, helped in Syria, and now is fighting in Iraq.
And so, do you think, internationally, and obviously, I mean, I'm a total dove. I think pull out everywhere. Realistically, I don't think I can expect that to happen, on the national stage. I mean, what do you think is the best outcome you can ask for, as far as the national government to actually do? I mean, if they're killing American citizens, then, I mean, they're basically begging to be attacked, don't you think?
Well, it's interesting. This is a really interesting development, and there's some ironies here, because I can't help but feel this really feels like World War I redux, redo, because this feels like the Ottoman Empire versus the British Empire, or versus, kind of the white man. And it's ironic because a lot of the rhetoric, I feel, and I'm open to being wrong, but I feel that a lot of the rhetoric coming from ISIS or ISIL, whichever term they want to use, smacks very much of the return of an Ottoman Empire. Now, of course, then it gets into the question of, where did all of this, where did all these Arab conflicts start from in the first place? Did it all start from the fall of the Ottoman Empire? And was that a right thing or a wrong thing to occur? And,
sounds like Pizza Guy's gone.
Oh, yeah.
He had an important delivery.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think, Brian, you and I were actually talking about this off the air last night, and I think you've got an intelligent perspective on that. So go ahead. Why don't you continue?
Well, I don't know that I have an actual solution to the matter.
Oh, well, he didn't ask for a solution. He asked for a prediction almost.
Yeah, well, a prediction, honestly, and I don't say this lightly because I feel far too many people do say this really easily, but I think there's a setup for World War III here. I think that this is, and really, I don't like to use that term at all, but it's ironic because, this is almost exactly 100 years later. In fact, yeah. I had tweeted, I said, get ready for the 100th celebration of the British Empire versus the Ottoman Empire. And of course, in this case, it's the Commonwealth, because there's a certain group, almost one dare say a league of nations now signed up with the United States to take on this problem. Really, the solution does come down to what happens if you do just walk away. And it's so funny because this is what gets taught in school now. It's like, no, don't engage in the fight. Just, get away from it. This is what everybody's taught, but except for when it comes to the national stage, that's not what you do. You don't just get out of there. You want to get payback. Well, personally, in my opinion, I understand that feeling of wanting payback. It's the very reason I joined the military in 2002, because I wanted to go hurt some people because I had some family die in New York City. Okay. And
on 9/11?
On 9/11.
Okay.
And it was very disconcerting to me, and I have no problem admitting that was straight up revenge. And also it came from the fact that there was a lot of rhetoric in the United States itself of people saying, hey, the Jews caused this or stuff like, all this crazy, just this violent rhetoric going around. And honestly, can anybody tell me what we've done in Afghanistan that has somehow kept the actions of terrorism, of what occurred in 9/11 and et cetera? Has it solved any of that? No, look what we have going on with ISIS. It hasn't solved anything.
Yeah, I think that it seems to me that the only solution that I'm going to be able to proffer, I don't have any, as somebody who doesn't believe that war is a very good solution to problems, I have to say the United States has to step out of this one. The Middle East, if you want me to comment on it, I think you have to go back a long time. The Ottoman Empire prevented equilibrium from occurring in the Middle East because they ruled over them.
Right.
Then the British prevented equilibrium from occurring in the Middle East because they ruled over them. And now the United States, basically from the installation of the Shah on, has prevented equilibrium from occurring in the Middle East because they've been involved and been meddling. And until the United States, until some people leave them alone and let them come to whatever equilibrium they're going to come to, you're going to continue to have these problems over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am telling you, as somebody who lost family, as somebody who lost friends in the military, who I watched them personally die because of, actions that we, as in the military, were doing over there. I am telling you, what I want, what I think is the only solution, is to get the hell out of there and never go back. Don't mess with it. Follow Reagan's advice when Reagan said in his personal diaries that if I knew the mentality of the people over there was, that it is just so different from how we think in the West, I would have never gone over there in the first place. Take that advice and run with it. I'm telling you, as somebody who has personally lost people, I know it's a terrible thing that Americans, like reporters or whoever, have been beheaded by these ISIS people. If you want to honor them, I want to honor the people that in my own life that I've lost. Get out and leave it be. Let it settle itself. Let it find, like Mark said, let it find its own equilibrium. That's my thoughts on it. Stephanie, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to people dying is not more people dying, not just throwing more people into the meat grinder and hoping the problem will resolve itself.
It doesn't solve it. I think there's enough proof.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, didn't people learn anything the last time around, that there's been this war that's been ongoing for the last more than a decade that hasn't been resolved? Despite the idea that some people believe that Obama ended the war. No, he actually didn't.
And that's funny, too.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's hilarious because just as soon as he starts pulling troops out, apparently, oh boy, there's just another damn crisis that we got to go solve.
Yeah, now he's building this coalition of the willing again.
Yeah.
That's like the exact same thing that George W. Bush did. If you need more proof that Obama is just continuing all of the horrible policies of George W. Bush, look no further than that. I mean, I don't know what to say to you if you think Obama's the president of peace. He's not. And I think we really have to be careful about this tribalism. Like, you guys know a lot more about history than I do. I think you guys are both somewhat of history buffs. That's not my personal interest. I actually feel quite bored learning about history. But I don't think, in the end, if I did learn about the history of the Ottoman Empire and the British Empire, that it really convinced me of anything different. I might sound a little more informed, but I wouldn't come up with a different solution.
I think that's what history is all about, Stephanie. History is all about being able to drop the proper name of the place or the person or the empire into the proper slot while you're talking, and then people are like, oh, well, he must know.
He knows what he's talking about.
He must know.
Yeah,
well, at the same
I know what
time,
I'm talking about in terms of be careful of tribalism, because that's what gets us into all of these things. We're all human beings, and we just need to get together and love one another, for lack of a better word, not to sound corny.
What do you think about ISIS? We'll get to your calls. David in South Carolina. David, you're on Free Talk Live. What would you like to talk about? Thank you again for waiting as well.
Hello, Brian, Stephanie, and Mark. Appreciate the program. Tonight I would like to continue to talk about the ISIS situation.
Sure.
What it appears to be happening is a monster that we helped create is basically inviting us to a slaughter. That's why they are begging us to come there, if you will, with ground troops, which we shouldn't do.
Okay, I'm totally with you on this as a monster that the United States has definitely helped create, no doubt about it. So what do you mean by it? It sounds like you're saying it's a trap. You want to elaborate on that? It's a trap, Starp.
Yeah. If we were to put troops on the ground over there, I don't think we will be able to fight them, because they are not, if you will, a nation-state type military that we're used to fighting. So I don't think we do good on that.
Yeah, David, I think you raise a great point. And the reason I want to say that is that a lot of people feel that the United States military is this incredibly compassionate force. As a one-time member of that organization, I would say that's not entirely accurate. But an organization that was particularly brutal was the Army of the Armed Services of the USSR. And they could not do anything in this area as far as controlling it. It was just a constant battle that certainly helped helped in bankrupting that entire republic. And yes, the USSR was a republic. So, David, do you have any further thoughts on that?
Yes. Another monster that I see in this picture are some of these are so-called leaders here in the United States and some of the members of the media that, regardless of what the president says or doesn't say, is dissected. I mean, to the extent where they're making reference to his speech cadence, and they can continue to compare him to other, if you will, world leaders, as if they're looking for their great white hope. Anyone will do but this man. I mean, to elevate Putin over our president, and then to give not Tony Blair, but David Cameron high accolades for increasing the threat level. I mean, it's like, I'm not besmirching Mr. Cameron, but aren't we committing more resources to that effort than he is?
So, Mark, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, so when I look at this, I would agree with you that it seems like, some folks are going against Obama as much as they possibly can. However, it's not I don't have a dog in this race. As far as I'm concerned, the Republicans and the Democrats have made this bed up to this point. What's going on with ISIS in the Middle East isn't new. It didn't start under Obama. It didn't start under Bush.
Oh, I'd say it's 100 years old.
Well, I mean, I think the U.S. is only responsible from maybe
50.
Late 40s, early 50s.
Yeah,
but that's more than a half a century, and there's a lot of presidents prior to Reagan, even that are responsible for this. So I think it's just people trying to say, all the Republicans are trying to do is get a Republican in 2016. That's what their job is. And their job is to say whatever it takes to do that. And the Democrats' job, I mean, Obama's saying that he's not going to move on this amnesty thing until after the election. Why do you suppose he's doing that? Why does he want Central American kids to suffer? The reason is because he believes that he can get one or two more seats in the Senate. And it's all about politics. And until you remove the politicians from politics, you're not going to, it's not. That's the problem.
Or until you put them on the quote-unquote front lines and say, hey, buddy, you first.
Yeah.
If you want to climb that mountain, you go for it. David,
I agree with you.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I agree with you on those points, but what I get so upset when it's like we are telegraphing to, if you will, our opposition, Russia, how much we hate this man, basically saying you can do whatever you want and we'll lift you up and we'll smash our own president.
David, thank you very much for your thoughts tonight. Let's go ahead. We've got another person who's been very patiently waiting. Gerald. Gerald, you're on Free Talk Live. What would you like to talk about?
Well, a couple of comments. First-time listener. I was
glad to have you on board.
East of Des Moines now. Thank you. And a couple of comments. First of all, on the comparison of Obama to Bush, obviously they're both politicians. I'm not a Bush fan per se, but you can at least say that he was a patriot or is a patriot, whereas I believe Obama is doing everything in his power to, as he says, reinvent or reorganize our great United States of America.
What does patriot mean to you?
Patriot means you do anything and everything you can for the betterment of our country and our people.
So what's a country? Because I have a difficult time with this, too. I don't believe in the term patriot.
A country is a border filled with people of like ideals and ways of life.
So a country is a geopolitical mass.
So what happens if someone's within the geopolitical boundary but doesn't have like ideals? What would that look like?
Well, that's where ISIS comes in. And you all are saying that we need to play nice and sit around and roast s'mores on the fire and sing Kumbaya with ISIS and get along.
That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm talking about Kumbaya. I have spent more than a decade of my life becoming a radio professional so that I can come on and I can be some kind of stupid Democratic trope for you. That's exactly what I've done with my life, sir.
Well, I think that'll work until ISIS puts a butcher knife. You guys forget that Daniel Pearl was executed about 10 years ago, and I made the
Yep.
mistake
I don't
of
forget.
watching that video.
Yeah, it's
Well,
awful.
some people have, because some people, say that it's the second journalist. Well, it's actually the third. But I actually, being an ex-Marine and a history teacher for most of my life, I made the mistake of watching that video, and I can say it's actually, I would prefer the guillotine or samurai sword any day.
The guillotine's a
That's
very
actually
humane way to execute somebody if you're going to do it. It's
Gerald,
gross.
Gerald, I'm ex-military. I was in the Army, and just my opinion on it is that any action that we could possibly take over there, and when I say we, I mean the military, would just fan this fire way more. Bringing more people over there is just going to be more death. That's all. Any action, any foreign policy action that the U.S. has ever taken has just brought on more death, including the very recent beheadings that have occurred.
They were not prevented by the last 10 years of
my military
action.
actions over there had solved clearly nothing, and I am nothing less than insulted at the idea that somehow more would solve this.
Well, and I'm not saying more. I'm saying less. I'm saying you send over, scatter some special teams, some forced Marine Con, some scout snipers, some Green Berets, drop them in and let them just wreak havoc.
Why not empty the prisons instead?
Do what they do.
I mean, this country's incarcerated more people than any other country on the planet has ever done in history. Why not take the prisoners?
Incarceration's a joke unless you send them to Cuba.
What, you think incarceration in the United States is nice?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
You're speaking to someone who spent some time in prison, which is Mark.
Right. I spent 9 years in prison, and I've got to say that I never saw anybody trying to get back in.
Believe it or not, I have actually been in jail overnight once here and a few days in a Mexican jail. It's not pretty.
Mexican jail's got to suck.
Yeah, it does. These people are out for the destruction of anybody that's not Muslim, and even some of those Muslims.
Some Muslims are out for that, and maybe these ISIS folks are that way, but I think that it forwards the conversation towards that when we array ourselves against them.
Absolutely. Gerald, thank you very much for the call and your thoughts. I think, you send anybody over there. Any country that gets involved over there is just creating recruitment tapes for groups
perpetuating the violence.
For violent groups, exactly.
Let's real quick address the last caller, because I think that a lot of people, especially first-time listeners, don't know what they're hearing on Free Talk Live. Free Talk Live we believe that peace, freedom, and personal responsibility are the best solutions to problems around the world and at home. So we tend not to believe that the United States military can solve problems. And, mostly that's been borne out. There have been a couple of instances, where I think Japan and Germany, these are pretty good instances, but there's countries there.
Maybe.
Now you can't say, when was the last time the United States was at war with a country?
Right.
The Taliban sort of dropped its weapons and ran away. Iraq, whatever that war was, Bush was right that mission was accomplished, but they couldn't keep the peace, not by a long shot.
Yeah, I think a lot of people recognize freedom when they see it, and freedom has answers to things. And the important thing to remember is that, freedom, it's not a light switch. It doesn't go on and off. It's either always on or it just might as well stay off.
People have to fight for it. This is a country that had its revolution for its independence. And why in the world would you try to shove independence down somebody else's throat if they don't want it? Also, the term patriotism, what is that? It's pride in something somebody else has done. It's pride in where you were born.
Being born in a certain area, which doesn't, you haven't chosen that, right?
I don't hate America. I just don't see any particular reason why, why is somebody else lesser than I?
Right. It's like, what's the virtue in being born in a certain town or liking a certain sports team or something, right? There's no real choice involved in that. It's just where you happen to be born.
Yep, but that is the sports team that I like. I like my, it's the one close to my house that I was born in.
Is it Jose in Michigan take control here? Jose, are you with us?
Yes, good evening. Thank you for taking my call. I enjoy the program very much.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks.
Intelligent comments and intelligent callers. I wanted to expand a little bit on the question of ISIS, if I may.
Please.
First of all, there is a big problem coming from the U.S. I think that the biggest problem is how we look at some things from a partisan point of view. It used to be a tradition that foreign policy would normally stop at the shore, but just shortly around Vietnam era, especially during the Second Gulf War. This tradition just has basically collapsed, and I don't think we are going to solve this problem if we engage in self-flagellation. Start blaming us and making ourselves responsible. I mean, us, the United States, for what's happening there. On a short-term tactical basis, we have committed some errors, indeed. But this problem of the Middle East is not 50, 10, 100 years old. It's 1,400 years old. The region basically has been stuck in a pre-19th century, pre-nation state mentality. And it is a problem that they have to solve themselves. It basically comes down to two things. One is the succession of Muhammad between the Shia and the Sunni, and also the version that they have of what constitutes a nation and a nation state. And we in the West have been dealing with them from that perspective, and it is the wrong perspective. On the other hand, to look at it from a semi-isolationist point of view and say that we need to let them sort it out, it's a big problem, because as part of that 19th century development before that of the nation state, we have come to a state of law, international law, that commits nations to pay attention to atrocities and things of that nature.
Yep, absolutely.
And the other problem is that we do have interest. It's just that we, in the 21st century now...
I would point out that we don't. I think that that's absolutely not true. I think that there are corporations that have interests, and that those corporations pay off politicians who then claim that I have interests, but I don't think I actually have interests over there.
Well, I'll take issue with that, because in a way I can see your point, but the problem is that we are part of the corporation.
Which corporation are you referring to?
I'm not getting a paycheck from them.
Well, you may not personally, and I may not personally, but right now we are. I'm holding a telephone that is part of that corporate structure. We are communicating through airways that is regulated between the marriage of government and private sector. We communicate through the internet. So when I say the national interest, this is the problem that we have in the 21st century. The national interest was easily defined in the 19th century and even in the 20th century within national borders. But now national borders have become effectively, as demonstrated in 9/11, basically symbolic. We have a ultra worldly ruling class that has transgenderized finances, and everybody has everybody else by the tail.
Yeah, Jose, I agree with you on the idea that this is this overall overarching problem of that area. It goes well beyond 100 years, into the 1400 years, maybe even beyond marker. I'm definitely with you on that, and I'm curious, what do you see as the solution? I mean, clearly you've got a grasp of what's going on, no doubt. So what do you see as a solution for what is happening in the Middle East?
Well, the first thing we need to do is to have a multi-pronged approach to this, okay? A very large military solution at the moment with troops on the ground is definitely not what is called for. However, it isn't also called for to come and tell the world that you don't have a strategy. That is a terrible mistake. It's a terrible signal to send. So I think there are other people who have a stake in the region, starting with the main actors in the region, the Saudi Arabia, the sectors between that do have some kind of a still national structure from where they can operate, and those are the major actors like Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the Saudi countries, the Sunni countries, and Iran. They have skin in the game. And then after that, everybody who does business with them, like we do, and Europe does, also have the skin in the game. So they have to come in with a very comprehensive short-term and long-term strategy. Short-term at the moment to stop this massacre, this horrible killing going on. And that can be done in many different tactical ways. But also you need to have a long-term strategy to how to, without getting into a project of trying to democratize the region, trying for us to first to understand what the culture is like and not to expect them to be like us.
Yeah, I agree with that point, actually, that you can't expect, and in fact, that really, in my opinion, bolsters what I guess could be called the semi-isolationist view of the idea that being over there when not understanding how their culture even works is dangerous in and of itself.
The only time it matters, I mean, okay, so look, Japan and the United States, two completely different cultures. Somehow they can get along when it comes to business. And the reason is we're willing to overlook a little bit as far as how somebody comes across when you're trying to do business with them.
Business is a great incentive to learn about cultural stuff.
Right. And whereas when you're over there telling them how they're going to live, suddenly their culture gets far more important to them than it was otherwise. And what I'm curious about, Jose, what do you go on, Stephanie?
Oh, I was going to say, for a long-term strategy, like you mentioned, Jose, what do you think about opening up the borders, and letting people immigrate to the U.S. who want to come here and get away from oppressive regimes?
Oh, I think that's a horrible idea because I think it's actually imperialism in reverse. Let me explain that. It might take me a minute or so, but to open the borders to a population that is really unprepared to, it would be okay. Let me go back. In the past, our type of imperialism was we would go to their countries, we would use their resources, we would use their labor force in-house in their country. We export the resources, we send them back already manufactured to them, and that's how we make money. It was kind of a mercantile type of arrangement. But now we are importing their labor force, and we are then providing a relief valve for those countries, the elites of those countries. We're giving them a way out from a youth population that it is a danger to them that could challenge their system into democratizing in the most important democratization that is needed in Latin America.
Wouldn't that create a really strong incentive for those countries to step forward and create? I mean, now when their population can't leave, they can do whatever the hell they want to them. But when their population can leave, well, yeah, you're right. The rich people will control the resources, but the resources really are useless unless you have people to harvest them.
No, because not everybody's going to leave, of course. So what you have is
right. The old people will stay.
Well, not just the old people. I mean, really, in reality, not everybody's going to leave. I'm not saying you got a percentage of the youth young population that's leaving, but not it doesn't go between more than 10%. It's not a massive exodus. There's a representation. But for example, you have El Salvador that something like 15% of the GDP of Salvador depends on money that immigrants send to El Salvador.
Yeah.
And the same with Honduras, the same with Mexico. So what we're doing is we are hypocritically, in my opinion, entering into a marriage of convenience. This problem it's been going on for a long time. President Bush offered a solution to this, and even the same activists for immigration were the ones to sabotage it, because at the upper levels where these powers decisions are made, illegal immigration, it's a great thing. It's a marriage of convenience. Everybody except the ones that matter, the victims, benefit from it. The Central American governments, like I said, have a relief valve from letting go a potential revolutionary mass of people. These are, in the case of El Salvador, for example, all these kids are.
Jose, yeah, we're up against the clock. I really appreciate your call and your thoughts. Absolutely, a great, an interesting perspective, no doubt about it. Thank you for calling in, and please feel free to call in again, of course. At the end of all that, I can't help but feel like the one problem is the same word that keeps getting repeated: nations. And maybe if that idea went away, maybe we'd find a lot of these problems go away.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.